Thomas and Friends: The Adventure Begins US, full movie. The Northwestern Railway was one of the most important railways on the island of Sodor. Every day, engines of all shapes and sizes puffed and chuffed along the rails, making deliveries, transporting passengers, and keeping the island running smoothly. Among these hard-working engines was Edward. Though not the biggest or fastest, Edward was known across Sodor for his patience, kindness, and experience. Edward spent his days shunting, moving freight cars and passenger coaches around the yard so that the larger engines like Gordon could easily start their journeys. Edward didn't mind being a helper. In fact, he took pride in being reliable. But not all engines shared that feeling. Gordon, the big blue express engine, was the strongest and one of the fastest. He pulled the express train, which meant rushing down the main line at top speed with elegant coaches. He loved the admiration that came with that job. What he didn't love was pulling freight. One day, Gordon grumbled while being coupled to a line of freight cars, "I shall not have to pull these noisy, dirty trucks anymore. Sir Topham Hatt is getting a new engine, you know. One to handle the jobs beneath important engines like me." Edward smiled gently. "A new engine, eh?" "Yes," Gordon sniffed, "and hopefully not another with wooden brake blocks like James." That was a disaster. Just then, a small tank engine rolled into the yard. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy boiler, and a face filled with curiosity and excitement. "Hello," he called brightly. "I'm Thomas. I've come all the way from the mainland." Edward welcomed him kindly, but Gordon gave him a look of disinterest. "Humph. Another small engine," Gordon muttered. "Great. Just what we needed." Thomas looked around eagerly. "I can't wait to start. I want to be a really useful engine." Sir Topham had arrived shortly after. "Ah, you must be Thomas, my new tank engine. Welcome to Sodor. Edward, please show him around and help him get started." "Yes, sir," Edward said, as Thomas beamed. Thomas began his new job shunting coaches and trucks in the yard. He tried to work quickly to impress the others, but his eagerness sometimes got in the way. He bumped cars too hard, forgot to wait for signals, and once nearly knocked over a pile of luggage. "I'll get the hang of this," he said breathlessly. "I just want to pull a train, like the big engines." One day, when Henry, the shy green engine, wasn't feeling well, Thomas was asked to fetch his coaches. "Me? Really?" he exclaimed. He raced around to the front of the train, thrilled. But he was so excited, he left the station before the coaches were even coupled. "Thomas! Come back," shouted the yard workers. It was too late. Thomas sped down the line, thinking he was pulling his first passenger train. He passed Edward, who called out, "Thomas, where are your coaches?" Thomas gasped and screeched to a halt. Oh no! Back at the station, passengers were fuming. Sir Topham Hatt was not amused. "I told you to wait, Thomas. You must learn to be patient." Thomas was embarrassed. "Yes, sir," he mumbled. Later, Edward found him sulking by the water tower. "It's okay, Thomas. We all make mistakes. That's how we learn." "I just want to be useful," Thomas said. "And you will be," Edward said with a smile. "But first, you have to listen, learn, and take your time." That night in the sheds, Thomas looked around at the other engines. They all had their own jobs, their own stories. He couldn't wait to have one of his own. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "I'll do better." Fade to black. The sun rose over Tidmouth Sheds, and Thomas was the first to open his eyes. His boiler fizzed with excitement. Today was a new day, a chance to prove himself. Edward was already awake. "Morning, Thomas," he greeted warmly. "Good morning, Edward. I'm ready to work. Ready to listen. Ready to learn." Edward chuckled. "That's the spirit." After breakfasting at the water tower and getting a full boiler, Thomas followed Edward back to the yard. This time, he waited patiently for instructions. He practiced coupling carefully and gently. He checked each car's position twice. His buffers stayed clean, and his wheels moved with confidence. Later in the morning, Gordon thundered by with the express. He glanced down at Thomas and smirked. "Still shunting, I see." Thomas didn't flinch this time. "I'm learning how to be really useful," he said proudly. Gordon puffed away, unimpressed. Just then, a whistle echoed through the station yard. James, the shiny red engine, was showing off his new paintwork. He steamed past proudly with his coaches. "Nice and clean. Look at me shine," James sang. "Better not get too close, Thomas, or you might scuff my livery." "I'm not trying to be shiny," Thomas replied. "I'm trying to be helpful." James snorted but said nothing more. That afternoon, Thomas passed the breakdown train tucked quietly in a siding. He slowed curiously. "Why are those cars always sitting there?" he asked. "Those are only used for emergencies," Edward explained. "When an engine goes off the rails or something needs lifting, Judy and Jerome come to the rescue." "Wow," Thomas whispered. "I hope I never need them." Edward gave him a knowing look. "Just remember, it's not about never making mistakes. It's about what you do afterward." Thomas took that to heart. One rainy morning, Henry wouldn't come out of the shed. "I don't feel well," he said, staring out at the raindrops. "You're not scared of the rain again, are you?" asked Thomas. "No." Henry huffed. "My boiler feels strange." Sir Topham Hatt was worried. "We can't delay the morning train." "Who can pull it?" Thomas stepped forward. "I'll do it, sir." "Are you sure, Thomas?" "Yes, sir. I've been practicing." Sir Topham Hatt nodded. "Very well. Be careful." This time, Thomas waited as the workers coupled him to the coaches. He listened for the guard's whistle. When everything was ready, he moved forward, not too fast, not too slow, just right. He pulled the train smoothly along the line. Passengers waved from the windows. Stationmasters tipped their hats. Even the signals turned green as if cheering him on. When he arrived at the final station, Sir Topham Hatt was there waiting. "Well done, Thomas," he said. "You've come a long way." Thomas beamed. But the biggest test came the very next day. Henry was out of service again, and James had an important goods train to deliver. "Bah! Why do I always get the dirty jobs?" James complained. "You think you can do better?" he challenged Thomas. "I'll try," Thomas said. "Be careful," Edward warned. "Trucks aren't like coaches. They push and pull and play tricks." "I can handle them," Thomas said, feeling brave. But the trucks were naughty. They banged into each other. They jerked Thomas forward. Down a steep hill, they shoved harder and harder. "Slow down," Thomas cried. "My brakes." Suddenly, smoke began pouring from his wheels. His wooden brake blocks had caught fire. "Help!" he yelled. Edward saw him rushing by and quickly chased after him. "I'm going to couple up behind you, Thomas. Hold on." With a clang and a jolt, Edward caught the train and slowly braked. Bit by bit, the train slowed, finally coming to a halt just before a sharp curve. James, watching from the sideline, gasped. Sir Topham had arrived minutes later. "Are you both all right?" "Yes, sir," they panted. "You were brave, Thomas. Foolish to rush, but brave to call for help and let Edward assist you." Thomas blushed. "I still have a lot to learn." "And learn you shall," Sir Topham Hatt said. "But today, you were a truly useful engine." Fade to black. After the brake fire incident, Thomas stayed in the yard for several days. His wheels ached, and his pride had taken a knock. But he was determined to improve. "I want to learn properly," Thomas told Edward. "I don't want to just rush into things." Edward nodded. That's the first step to becoming a great engine. The other engines started to notice. Thomas wasn't just a chatterbox anymore, he was focused. He helped Henry with his coaches when the rain made him nervous. He assisted James with shunting without teasing. Even Gordon, though gruff, gave him a nod of approval one morning. Thomas kept working hard. He practiced coupling in the yard, adjusted to how each kind of car behaved, and learned to listen carefully to the trucks. One sunny afternoon, Sir Topham had arrived at the sheds with exciting news. "Thomas, I'd like you to deliver an important goods train to Vickerstown tomorrow," he announced. "Me, sir?" "Yes. You've earned the chance. But remember, take your time, and trust the brakes." "I will, sir." "Thank you." That night, Thomas could hardly sleep. Edward stayed up with him, talking about the route, the signals, and the steep hill. "Remember what happened last time," Edward said gently. "Keep the trucks under control from the start." "I will. I promise." The next morning, the sun bathed the station in gold. Thomas was coupled to a long line of freight cars, freshly oiled and ready to roll. "Ready, Thomas?" the yardmaster asked. Thomas took a deep breath. "Ready." He eased forward slowly, careful not to let the trucks jolt. At first, they muttered and rattled, but Thomas kept a steady pace. As he neared the infamous hill, he remembered Edward's words. He applied his brakes early, slowed the line down, and warned the trucks. "No silly tricks today," he said firmly. The trucks moaned but obeyed. By the time Thomas reached the top, he was puffing hard but smiling. "I'm doing it," he said aloud. "I'm really doing it." He coasted smoothly into Vickerstown, where Sir Topham Hatt and several workmen waited. "Well done, Thomas," Sir Topham Hatt said proudly. "You've come a very long way." "I couldn't have done it without Edward," Thomas replied. Later that week, Thomas got his biggest surprise yet. Sir Topham Hatt gathered the engines at the sheds. "Thomas," he said, "thanks to your hard work, I've decided it's time you had your own branch line." "My own branch line?" Thomas gasped. "Yes. You'll run between Knapford and Farquhar, with Annie and Clarabelle as your regular coaches." Thomas was overjoyed. Gordon looked impressed. James smiled. Edward's eyes twinkled with pride. "You deserve it, Thomas," Edward said. "You've earned it." The next morning, Thomas stood proudly in the yard, freshly polished, his number one gleaming in the sunlight. Annie and Clarabelle were behind him, chattering excitedly. "Oh my," said Annie. "We have our very own engine now." "And such a fine little engine, too," added Clarabelle. Thomas puffed out his chest. "We're going to do great things together." And as he steamed off down the track, bells ringing and children waving, Thomas felt a warmth in his boiler that had nothing to do with steam. He was no longer just the little engine in the yard. He was Thomas, the really useful engine. Fade to black.